Shabbat shalom, everyone. You're doing well. This week's parsha is Tetzaveh, and we're still in the book of Shemot, book of Exodus, and we're continuing to learn about the Mishkan, how the portable temple that the Jews used while wandering in the desert. There's a lot in this parsha, a lot about what the priests would wear. It's interesting, it's cool. What I'd like to talk about this week in the Dvar Torah is actually about the special Shabbat that it is, because it's Shabbat Zachor, or the Shabbat of Remembrance. And we read a small portion from the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, the Shabbat before Purim, because we're supposed to remember what Amalek, the Amalekites, did to us on our way out of Egypt. And we learn that Haman, the villain of the Purim story, was a descendant of Amalek. So we read this the Shabbat before Purim to remind us again of what we should not forget. So we'll read the regular Parsha, Tetzaveh, and then afterward we read a bit of what makes this Shabbat Zachor. So I'll read the translation in English. You shall remember what Amalek did to you on the way when you went out of Egypt, how he happened upon you on the way and cut off all the stragglers at your rear when you were faint and weary, and he did not fear God. Therefore it will be when the Lord your God grants you respite from all your enemies around you in the land which the Lord your God gives to you as an inheritance to possess, that you shall obliterate the remembrance of Amalek from beneath the heavens. You shall not forget. Okay. What did Amalek do? What did the Amalekites do that was so bad? Okay, so they targeted. So the Jews have just experienced the very emotionally draining 10 plagues. God does all the 10 plagues. Then by a miracle, Moshe and God split the Red Sea. There's two walls of water. The Jews walk across on dry land. The water splashes back down and destroys all the Egyptians, and the Jewish people are walking out. Who the heck would mess with the Jewish people who is being guarded and watched over by the God of Israel? Who would do such a thing? An enemy that hates without reason. Because an enemy that hates with reason would say that these Jewish people are being watched over by a pretty intense and scary God. I'm going to keep my distance. No. The Amalekites hated without logic or reason. They were not ones who could be reasoned with and could be spoken to and could have their hatred tamped down by this. No. They are enemies that hate and do terrible things to vulnerable people. The Amalekites attacked the stragglers at the end, near the back of the group of people of the Jews. What does this mean? This is the old people, the slow people, the vulnerable people. Who attacks vulnerable people and hates and hates and hates without logic? We don't need to extrapolate much. We are facing an enemy such as that now. And so, why do we keep reading Shabbat? Why do we read the Shabbat Zachor? That's why we have to remember Amalek. We have to remember that in this world, there exists, again, like I said, enemies that hate without reason or logic. And when we know that, when we know that in our hearts, we can remember who we are, who the Jewish people are. And in remembering, do not forget them, we can remember who we are. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we have to come home to what makes us true Jews. Or I'll explain what I mean. There's some really amazing stories that are coming out of the people who were recently freed from captivity. And the two examples I'll give of Ohad Ben Ami, who I think is in his 60s, is a dad, has a few daughters. He was a member of one of the kibbutzes on the border of Gaza. So he's, politically to the left, not religious. Oftentimes these kibbutzim are, a-religious. They sort of reject religion. But in captivity, Ohad would try to say brachot, blessings, over the food he would eat, but he didn't know the full blessing, so he would just say borei minei mezonot for all the food, which is the blessing you say over grains. And when he left captivity, he wanted to know the real blessings because he would say blessings over all of his food. Can you imagine you're being given a pita or some pasta once a day, and you're saying a blessing over this? Although you can imagine that if you're only given food so often that the food is so holy to you, someone who's not religious in their whole life decides to start saying blessings over food in captivity, the most difficult, challenging time a person could ever experience. It's the faith and beauty is beyond me. It's unbelievable that these people were ever in the situation to begin with, but then had the koach, the strength to say blessings in captivity. It's unbelievable. He learned about Havdalah from some of the people that he was in captivity, and afterward wanted to learn about Havdalah and what it actually was after leaving captivity. The first Shabbat after captivity, he has his family all around him, and he wants to for Shabbat, he doesn't want any fancy food. He just wants to do kiddush, do hamotzi, light the candles. He just wants to do the Jewish traditions. That's what he wants. Someone who's never been religious in his life experiences the most harrowing thing you can ever experience. And all he wants is to be connected to God. It's unbelievable. It's beyond me. It's truly amazing and beautiful. Another example is of Omer Shem Tov. Omer Shem Tov was a young kid in his 20s. He, growing up, I think it sounds like his family was maybe Masorti, traditional. They would say Kiddush on Friday night, but, aren't necessarily so religious. In captivity, he found this Chabad booklet of teachings, Dvar Malchus, and he found Psalm 100 that had been left behind by an IDF soldier, and he would read them over and over and over. And he and other hostages. They gathered some bread, they gathered some grape juice, and for 5 months they would save it and save it and save it and count the days to know when it was Shabbat, to say Kiddush, to say Hamotzi, to do something holy and connected while in captivity. And then he really wanted to fast on Yom Kippur, but he didn't know what day it was. And he would listen to he would hear a little bit of the radio. And in retrospect, he realized that there was a day where none of the radio stations played any music because it was Yom Kippur. And he was so saddened that he couldn't fast in captivity because it was Yom Kippur. It's like these stories are so insane, are so unbelievable that in captivity, these people returned to who they were. They felt they were being watched over and they were able to have the strength to do these things in captivity. It is so unbelievable and so touching and so amazing. And it's just a reminder that the same bracha, the same blessing, the same Torah, the same teachings, the same ethics, everything that we learn now are the same ethics and learning and teachings and blessings and Torah that we've been learning for thousands of years. We have always had the ability to return to the Jews that we are in our hearts. We've always had the opportunity. And that's what we must do. We must remember who we are. And we will never let anyone take that away from us. So, Shabbat Shalom. God willing, I'll see you all next week. I hope you found these stories as meaningful as I did. And God willing, I'll see you all next week.